Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraj Ki Jai. And today we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 16, text number 12. Jaya and Vijaya cursed by the sages. And text number 12 says, these servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. From this statement, we can understand how anxious the Lord is to get his servitor back into Vaikuntha. This incident therefore proves that those who have once entered the Vaikuntha planet can never fall down. The case of Jaya Vijaya is not a fall down. It is just an accident. The Lord is always anxious to get such devotees back again to the Vaikuntha planets as soon as possible. It is to be assumed that there is no possibility of understanding between the Lord and the devotees, but when there are discrepancies, it is to be assumed that there is no possibility of a misunderstanding between the Lord and the devotees, but when there are discrepancies or disruption between one devotee and another, one has to suffer the consequence, although that suffering is temporary. The Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yeah. So, this verse says, these servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. So, Krishna is not insisting that his devotees be free of any punishment, but he's asking, or in a very nice way, that the punishment be done quickly so that his devotees may return to their service as doorkeepers of Vaikuntha. Okay, purport. From this statement, we can understand how anxious the Lord is to get his servitor back into Vaikuntha. This incident, therefore, proves that those who have once entered the Vaikuntha planet can never fall down. The case of Jaya and Vijaya is not a fall down, it's just an accident. The Lord is always anxious to get such devotees back again to the Vaikuntha planets as soon as possible. It is to be assumed that there is no possibility of a misunderstanding between the Lord and the devotees. But when there are discrepancies or disruptions between one devotee and another, one has to suffer the consequences, although that suffering is temporary. The Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. So it just shows how much the Lord loves his devotees and will do everything possible to help them when when they make a mistake. So here he says, I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. So the Lord is always anxious to bring his devotees back to Vaikuntha, and therefore is very gently asking the poor Kumaras to not have a lengthy time of punishment for his devotees, and so they can come back to their service. Okay. The Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. Well, that's an amazing statement. And well, actually, it's a fact that when someone is working for someone else and the worker makes a mistake, in one sense, it is the responsibility of the person who's engaging the worker to accept responsibility. Not that they did something wrong, but they are responsible for their worker. So here, the Lord is accepting responsibility. It says, the Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. So he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense. And that's a real leader. He accepts the responsibility for the people that are serving him. Okay, so, and he says, these servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. Well, the mind of their master is there should never be any transgression against anyone by his servants. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. So he's not asking them to exonerate them completely, but he's asking that they may return to their service quickly, and so he says they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. That's not a exorbitant request. It's a practical request. So, in the purport, it says, from this statement, we can understand how anxious the Lord is to get his servitor back to Vaikuntha. Well, we should meditate on that statement. Krishna is more anxious for us to go back to Godhead than we are. So we have to realize, how important it is to go back to Godhead. It's not that we should stay birth after birth in the material world. That's a big, big mistake. So if we have a chance to go back to Godhead quickly, we should take it. And the way to do that is to spend a whole lifetime chanting Hare Krishna and engaging in devotional service. Then we get on a fast track to go back to Godhead. But if we dilly-dally and, do half things, a little bit of devotional service and a little bit of nonsense and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay in the material world. So we have to be as anxious as the Lord is for us to go back to Godhead. The Lord is more anxious than we are for our freedom from cycle of birth and death. So we should accept the Lord's, let's say, desire to see us come back to Godhead and do everything possible to have a complete spiritual life in the present situation that we're in, so that we can be eligible to go back to Godhead. Okay, the Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense. Well, yeah, these doormen, Jaya and Vijaya, they were working for Krishna, and if they committed an offense, the let's say the boss is responsible for his servants' offenses, and or at least he accepts the responsibility. It's not that he committed an offense, but he accepts the responsibility. And therefore, we can see how kind the Lord is. The Lord is so kind to his devotee that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. That's a real leader. Uh, and, uh, and therefore, we should understand the Lord is always anxious to get such devotees back again to Vaikuntha. And also, the case of Jaya and Vijaya is not a fall down. It is just an accident. Yeah, they didn't plan to make a mistake. It was an accident. Now you have to be very careful to see if something is an accident or if it is planned ahead of time. Sometimes things are planned to be done. Then the perpetrators are completely responsible. But if they do something and it's an accident, then they're not as responsible because people make mistakes in life. Now, this is interesting because even today, sometimes people make terrible mistakes, but they didn't mean to do it. And sometimes people lie and they make terrible mistakes and they plead, "Oh, I didn't mean to do it." But that can't be excused. However, uh, there are genuine situations when someone doesn't mean to do something bad, but they did do something bad. But uh, after carefully examining the situation and the evidence, sometimes they're not punished severely because it was an accident. But to understand if something is an accident or if something is premeditated, that's up to the judge and the jury. Uh, so sometimes things are not premeditated; they're genuine accidents. Now, if they're accidents, but due to gross, let's say, irresponsibility, then they're still going to be severely punished. But if it's genuinely an accident without any, let's say, real fault of the perpetrator, then they will not be so much punished. So here, one thing is for sure, that the Lord or Krishna is anxious to get his devotees back into, I mean, his servants back into Vaikuntha. So all of us are eternal servants of the Lord. Some of us know that, some of us don't. But he's more anxious for us to come back to Godhead than we are. Some people think, oh, it's okay, this material world, I have a nice job, I'm making some money, and I have a nice this and a nice that, and I'm very happy. Actually, that's an illusion. But temporarily, one may feel that they're very happy and they're very attached to staying in the material world. But that's a real bad decision. We should all want to go back to Godhead and be with Krishna. Why stay in the material world with all the horrible things that are happening? But somebody can say, well, maybe there's some horrible things, but I'm not experiencing them. I'm having a good time. I'm happy and so forth. But no one can have sustained happiness in the material world. And ultimately, there is birth, which is painful. There's old age, that's painful. There's birth, and there is sickness, and there are all kinds of problems. And then ultimately, there's death. So no one can be happy all the time. You only have short periods of so-called happiness and long periods of trouble and boredom also. So if you want sustained happiness, you have to go back to Godhead. Right? That's the only way to have sustained happiness. But in the material world, there's just little periods of happiness, a lot of periods of boredom, and some unfortunate periods of suffering. And some people, whose karma is bad, most of their life is suffering and very little happiness. Okay, so the Lord is always anxious to get such devotees back again to Vaikuntha planets as soon as possible. It is to be assumed that there is no possibility of a misunderstanding between the Lord and his devotee, but when there are discrepancies or disruptions between one devotee and another, one has to suffer the consequences, although that suffering is temporary. So we can never, let's say, get away from consequences of mistakes that we've made, but the suffering is limited. It's what we call token suffering because the devotee is always protected by Krishna. Therefore, we should become really serious devotees of Krishna. That way, we'll be protected by the Lord, even if we make egregious mistakes. Now, what's an egregious mistake? Well, you're driving a car and you have an accident and somebody dies. And because, maybe you weren't paying attention or something. Anyway, somebody dies in the accident. So that's a terrible situation. And, the police have to decide, and a judge has to decide whether you were criminally, what you would call, uh, criminally responsible, or whether it was a genuine mistake, and therefore the punishment is not as severe. But if you're criminally responsible, then the punishment is going to be much more severe. So that's why in life, you see there's all these judgments that have to be made, and people have to look at motive of why someone did something. And motive means, did they do something by accident? Well, that's the case here. The servants of the Lord accidentally made a mistake. It says the case of Jaya and Vijaya is not a fall down. It is just an accident. So you see, you have to study a situation to make a, let's say, fair judgment. So in this case, the case of Jaya and Vijaya was not a fall down. It was just an accident. It wasn't premeditated. So let's say someone is polishing a gun, and by accident it goes off and it kills someone. Now, the judge has to decide whether it was a premeditated murder or was it a genuine accident. If it was a genuine accident, then the punishment will not be severe. If it was premeditated, then the reaction is very severe. The punishment is very severe. So there are situations like this where a judge has to make a decision, and he has to look at all the evidence, and you know, and he's studying also the person who committed this, let's say, crime, whether it was premeditated and so forth. And it also depends on the behavior of the person. Like sometimes criminals that get caught, they're uh, never sorry for what they've done, and the judge, really gives them the most severe judgment because they're arrogant and they're not really they don't feel any remorse at all for what they've done. But there are other times where a person might have made a mistake, although a really bad mistake, and caused the death of someone or injury to someone. But the judge looks at the person to see, whether they're really mean or they plan to do something bad, or it was just a genuine accident. And then for him, they might not, give a severe punishment. So here it says, the Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. Well, that's an important statement because it shows that when you are a servant of Krishna, he will always protect you and help you in every situation that you might find yourself in. Now, the doormen were in the service of the Lord. They were not doing nonsense, but they made a mistake. And Krishna, understanding what really happened, accepted responsibility for their mistake. And there was no severe uh, punishment of the doorman. Of course, the four Kumaras are ready to curse the the four Kumaras, ready to curse the doorman to fall down into the material world again, and which is a horrible thing after you're in Vaikuntha, right? They were on the doors of Vaikuntha. They were the doormen, right? So they were right on the edge of Vaikuntha. So uh, their position was very nice, and to fall from that position would be horrible. Go back to the full-fledged material world. So now this is a very important point. It says, it is to be assumed that there is no possibility of misunderstanding between the Lord and the devotees. But when there are discrepancies or disruptions between one devotee and another, one has to suffer the consequence, although that suffering is temporary. So sometimes devotees get into arguments, and sometimes it can be pretty severe. Uh, or maybe not anything severe, but there are discrepancies or disruptions between one devotee and another. And one has to suffer the consequences, although that suffering is temporary. So if you want to have a good life, you should definitely be a devotee. And therefore, you won't go to Narak, which is hell. Now, hell, if you go to hell, I mean, the Christians say if you go to hell, that's it. You're stuck. You'll never get out. You're finished. You're fried, and that's it. You're forgotten. No, it's not really like that, because the Christians don't have a good understanding of the laws of karma and the pure, let's say, mercy of the Lord. If someone goes to hell for mistakes they've made, they can be rehabilitated. And that's why people like Narada Muni go to hell in order to save people from staying there eternally. So there's no, if you can be educated in Krishna consciousness, even in hell, you see, there's no limitation to how much possibilities there are for salvation in Krishna consciousness. Whereas the Krishnas will say, well, if you go to hell, that's it, you're finished. You'll never get out. Yes.
So if you go to hell, do you go to the earth first before you go to the back to Godhead, or do you just go directly back to Godhead?
Well, it depends. Depends. If you're a Christian, Christians think you go to hell, that's it, you'll never get out. And there are many different places in hell for depending on what sins that you've committed. It's in the Bhagavatam, but maybe it was before this or it's going to come after this. There's a whole description of what happens when you go to hell and all the different places in hell. But you can be saved by the mercy of a devotee. However, the Christians, they think you go to hell, you're finished. You're never coming back, right? Because they don't have real knowledge of what's real. Uh, because they don't have, the reason is they don't have any real acharyas. That's why. Whereas we have real acharyas in Krishna consciousness that explain all these things in depth. Look at this Srimad Bhagavatam. There's no book that compares to this, right? Uh, you can read other books, the Bible and so forth. It doesn't have all this information in it. And because of that, people make mistakes. Okay, so the Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the dormant's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. So if you want to have a good life, you should definitely become a devotee, even if you make mistakes. But those mistakes should not be premeditated, but sometimes we make mistakes. One time there was this girl, and she was a girl devotee, and she closed the door on the fingers of a young child. She didn't do it on purpose, but it just happened, right? And she felt really bad, right? And the child was screaming like anything. Right? So sometimes there are mistakes that are made. It's good not to make them, and it's good to be very careful. But this girl was not very careful, and she really felt very, very bad. And the mother also was not happy, and of course the child was really not happy. Because it closed the door on the fingers. Fortunately, it was a young child, so the bones of a young child are always very supple. They're not like an old person's bones. So it will. She eventually, the child eventually got over it. But the mother was really upset, and of course the child was upset. And the devotee that did that, felt very sorry. So there are such things as accidents, but there are other things that are called premeditated, not accidents. So a judge has to determine. How do you determine? You have to see if there's a motive. What is a motive? A motive is something that you plan to do. Look it up, the word motive. It's something that you plan to do.
Chance you have to do something like a motive uh, could be um
The reason for doing something, especially one that is hidden or not obvious.
Yeah. See, you should never speculate. If you don't know what it is, don't say anything. Right? You were just speculating now. They have to be careful. Yeah. Okay. Read that again.
The reason for doing something, especially one that is hidden or not obvious.
Yes. So that's a motive. So, but when there's a situation, the judge has to decide whether there was a specific motive for performing a heinous act, or if it was done by accident, or it was not really meant to be so severe, or something. So many shades of responsibility, and the judge has to understand it. Sometimes there are criminals that get caught for doing something bad, and they're proud about it, and they act very, you know, uh, 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 they don't feel sorry for what they've done. Then the judge, throws the book at them. But if the judge sees that someone's really sorry for what they've done, he might not forgive them completely, but he won't go so hard on them. So, um, yes, so there was this one lady. She took some drugs, and she got very high on drugs, and then she murdered the family. Right? So, there was a long period of a trial and everything, and then uh, she was sent to jail for a long the rest of her life. But in jail, she became a Christian, and then she started converting the people in jail to become Christians, right? And a whole bunch of Christian ministers signed a petition that they should let this woman out of jail. Although she killed some people, but she was making left and right conversions. So of course they never let her out, right? But they said, we're very happy that she's converting the criminals in jail to become Christians. And when she is hanged, she'll see her God, and he'll be very happy to welcome her to heaven. But we're not letting her out of jail. All these ministers, they signed a petition, that she should get out of jail. She's such a good person. She converted so many people. Blah blah blah. And the judge said, "Well, we're very happy to hear that, but she'll be blessed when she goes back to Godhead." Yeah. And so it's funny, how sometimes people make so many assumptions, but there's a judge, and the judge has to decide, what to do. But in this case, the judge said, "Well, I'm very happy that she's done all these good things, but she's not getting out of jail because what she did was so bad that we can't really forgive it. But God will forgive it." He said, "Well, let God forgive it." Okay. All right. So I think we'll go on to the next verse, unless there are any questions. So the main point here, the Lord is so kind to his devotees that he took all the responsibility for the doorman's offense and requested the sages to give them facilities to return to Vaikuntha as soon as possible. So why is that? Well, because the case of Jaya and Vijaya is not a fall down. It's just an accident. So you see, there are situations where you make a really bad mistake, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't pre-planned. It's because maybe some inattention or something that something horrible happened. It's like sometimes, you go to put your foot on the brake, but you accidentally put your foot on the accelerator. It happened, and then there's a big accident, and or someone's listening to. Sometimes you see these people driving down the street, and they're singing, and there's a little loud radio or something. Usually uh, they do it on purpose, so that they are noticed. The radio, the
Yeah. So a lot of times into school it's like at least 2 times a year.
yeah,
The loud cars.
yeah, or they have loud, very loud music going, and they're also singing. So basically, they're not really paying much attention to their driving, so it's easy to have an accident like that. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to what is it? Text 13 or 14?
13.
13.
13. Rama continued, even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger. See, now that's called a metaphor. Uh, Anger is being compared to a serpent. Usually don't say that, but here it's saying it to give real emphasis of how severe the situation was. Even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger, their souls were not satiated with hearing the Lord's lovely and illuminating speech, which was like a series of Vedic hymns. Really nice. In other words, the anger of the sages was so much that even though they were hearing the mellifluous and very nice speech of the Lord, uh, their anger was not abated. So even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger, their souls were not satiated with hearing the Lord's lovely and illuminating speech, which was like a series of Vedic hymns. Okay. Bitten by the serpent of anger. That's what we should focus on. Anger is destructive. Now, there are conditions where there's, let's say, uh, justification to be angry. But in most cases, when anger happens, it's destructive and very bad. Just like, let's say, uh, there's two boys. One is older and one is younger. And the older one has something that the younger one wants to have. So they get into a fight. Of course, the older one's going to be successful because he's bigger and stronger, right? And then the little one really starts crying, gets really angry, right? Frustrated. That happen to you sometimes? What? Sometimes. Okay. Anyway, it's not very nice, whether it's sometimes, all the time, or no time. So we have to be ready to be very kind and not get into these type of arguments. By the way, every argument, every, let's say, situation where there's a lot of anger, all problems will be solved over time because everyone gets older and dies. All the problems are going to get solved. You just have to be patient. That's all. People want immediate, solution to the problem, but if you're willing to be patient, all problems will go away gradually. Everybody wants, what do you call it, instant, oh, geez, I forget.
That used to instant coffee, instant meal.
What?
Everybody now used to instant meal, instant coffee.
Yeah,
Instant
everyone wants immediate sense gratification.
Instant pot, no?
Yeah, that's terrible. But uh, people who are intelligent, they learn to be patient. Because if you're patient, every problem will be solved over time. You just have to be patient. Now, sometimes you might have to wait several lifetimes for that problem to go away, but still, unless there's justifiable need to be violent, and there are situations that justifiable. There are 6 conditions that are justifiable for violence, but in general, if we just remain calm and be patient, over time, all problems gradually go away. It's just a matter of time. Sometimes, things are so bad that you have to, take a stand. But generally, most problems will go away just by being patient. Okay, so the Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import and its most profound significance. The sages heard it with wide open ears and pondered it as well. But although hearing, they could not understand what he intended to do, what he, meaning Krishna, intended to do. This is very nice English. There's a lot of very nice phrases here. So the Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend. That means that the Kumaras were having difficulty understanding what the excellent speech of the Lord. And why? Because of its momentous import. So let's look that word up, momentous, Momentous. It means generally it's something that's so great, so profound, that sometimes it's difficult. Yeah, okay, importance, okay. And it says, and its most profound significance. So the Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import and its most profound significance. Yes, the sages heard it with wide open ears and pondered it as well. Ponder means you think about it as well. But although hearing, they could not understand what he, meaning Krishna, intended to do. So sometimes people speak in such eloquent ways. They're saying something really good, but it's hard to understand really what they mean. So that's when you have to ask a question. Whenever there's a doubt in your mind about something, you should ask a question. If you don't ask a question, then you don't learn anything. And then a doubt becomes like an enemy because it's an unanswered question when you have a doubt. And if you don't ask questions, you could have that doubt for the rest of your life. But if you ask questions, then you can satisfy your, curiosity, and now there's no more doubt. But some people never ask questions, and they just live with a doubt the rest of their life, and they have very, hard opinion about everything. Why? Because they're not willing to hear things through and think about it carefully on the basis of Krishna conscious knowledge. They just make a decision and hold on to it, whether it's right or wrong. They're very adamant and not willing to go deep into a situation, deep understanding of a situation. So they have these superficial doubts and prejudices, and that leads to a lot of problems. Like my mother had a half brother-in-law, and one time my mother said something, and he didn't like it. So then he told my mother, "Don't ever talk to me again. I don't want to talk to you for the rest of your life." So, yeah, that's like the complete overkill, right? There's no reason for him to be so adamant. Not my mother, whatever she said was not really mean anyway, but he took it as some kind of a little bit of an offense. But the punishment was way over, was an overkill. What my mother said was not something so serious, but he took it so seriously that he never talked to her again the rest of his life. See,
Maharaj, this is very, very common. I have seen in childhood as well.
really?
People with small argument, they become so angry and they will end up like this.
Yeah,
Like,
they're not going to talk to you anymore. Even if they're members of your family. They say,
yes, sir. Even though they are like very close relatives.
Yeah.
And even though there are big functions coming into your family in the future, they will not talk.
Yeah.
So, then because of this.
And by the way, it's very interesting. Let's say they go to a funeral or they go to a party, and the person that they're not talking to is there. Now, they'll be talking to other persons, but they'll never talk to that person. Even if that person's standing next to them, it's like that person is not there. They ignore them completely. Yeah.
And one more thing.
There's a special word for that, and I think it's in Hindi also. It's called inat. A person is inat. I don't know. You recognize that word?
No.
Oh, okay. That means they're really stubborn. I'm really stubborn. If they say, "I'll never talk to you again," they really mean it. Even though they're relatives and everything. No, that means it's like crazy stubbornness.
In Maharaj, at that time, we were like small kids.
Yeah.
That was more difficult situation for us because their kids and our
they're
we are
friends. Yeah.
And we cannot talk.
You see how serious it is.
It was like more trouble for us.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're in some awkward situation. Like, if we will play, our parents or our relatives will not be happy. But we are still friends.
You see? That's because people have a false ego. The ego is so profound that they can't apologize. Say I'm sorry. Yeah. Unfortunate. Okay. So the Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import. In other words, what Krishna spoke to the four Kumaras was so profound they couldn't understand it. It was too big for them. They had a much more what we call parochial or limited facility of understanding. And the speech of the Lord was so momentous, so great, just they were not able to process it. They were not able to understand it. So the Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import. In other words, this tremendous, level of understanding. It was so great that they couldn't understand it. And its most profound significance, and the fact that the significance of it was so great, it was beyond their ability to understand. The sages heard it with wide open ears and pondered it as well. But although hearing, they could not understand what he meaning Krishna, intended to do. So they didn't know where this was going to go. They were going to curse the Kumaras, but after Krishna spoke, they didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah. Yes.
That
Stubborn.
yeah, stubborn is GD, I think.
Jiddi.
GD.
Jiddi. Yes.
GD.
Sounds like a Muslim word.
Yeah, it's a very common word. In Hindi, we use that Jiddi, very stubborn.
Okay, wait a minute. How do you spell that?
G. J.
J.
ID.
जिद्दी और हठी
Jiddi कर दो. Start with D.
हठी HADI और HADEE
Hatti can go in positive mode as well. Like small kids are hatti.
So is it Jiddi or Hadi?
Hatti means more. It can go positive notation as well. Like a child is naughty, so it can go in positive meaning as well. But Ziddi is like for stubborn.
जिद्दी is a Urdu word and hati is Hindi or Sanskrit word for the same.
Might be, yeah. I don't know.
So Ziddi is what?
Probably,
Muslim word?
yeah, Muslim word. Urdu.
Okay. Good. So whether it's Ziddi or Hadi, it's bad. Doesn't matter. Not a good way to be.
Maharaj, as you said, over a period of time, problems get solved because people will get old and die. I had seen that when in childhood we went to our village in summer vacation.
Yeah.
So people were sharing the stories like these are the old homes. Earlier people were fighting within that because the big families were living in that home. But now no one lives there. Like it's just abandoned.
Problems are false.
Problems are
Solved.
And
They all moved away.
they all moved.
They
Because-
abandoned that property.
Because the people those are living they are not living anymore, they are dead.
Yeah.
And their kids and grandkids they move to the cities.
Yeah.
So no one is interested in that property and it's just abandoned.
See, that's why I always say every problem is solved if you're willing to be patient, because people will move away or they die, there's no more problem. Just have to be patient, that's all. Okay, so are we ready? Okay, any questions?
I have one question about Vaikuntha.
Yes, please.
Okay, so can you travel to Vaikuntha while you're here in the human body? The reason why I ask is because I read somewhere Prabhupada was at a temple and he looked over and he said, Lord Shiva just walked in. Now, was he in Vaikuntha and was he like seeing with transcendental eyes?
Okay. When you're what you call a Vaikuntha man, you see things differently than ordinary people. You can see things and hear things that ordinary people don't see or hear. Why? Well, because ordinary people, their minds are always distracted by sense gratification. So even though, like, let's say Jesus Christ walks down the street, most people would ignore it, don't recognize, and so in order to be sensitive enough to understand what's happening, you have to have experience, you have to have some training to be able to recognize things. Like sometimes there might be a very great personality, but you can't understand that they're a great personality, right? They might not be dressed the way you think great personalities should be dressed, or they might not uh, talk in the way you think a great personality should talk. See, so therefore, you should never judge a person by their physical, uh, by the way they look. Like sometimes someone can be crippled, but still be a pure devotee. Okay? So you shouldn't judge people by the way they look. You should judge them by the way they talk and act. Not only talk, but act. So then you can recognize if someone is a devotee or not. So pure devotees are always living in Vaikuntha, whether they're in this world or in the other world. Uh, they're, they're Vaikuntha people, so their whole consciousness is Vaikuntha consciousness. Vaikuntha means that place where there's no anxiety and fear. Uh, why? Because they feel they're fully surrendered to Krishna, so therefore they know that Krishna will protect them. So Vaikuntha is a place where there's no anxiety. And when you associate with a genuine devotee, there's no anxiety also. Uh, Sometimes there are problems, but pure devotees are always have complete faith in Krishna. So they know somehow or other, in some mysterious way, Krishna is going to protect them. So they're not hopeless, they're not forlorn, they're patient, and they're waiting to see what Krishna wants. Um, so there are situations that look hopeless, but by being patient and chanting Hare Krishna, uh, many times those situations that look hopeless are resolved in a nice way because of the patience and faith of devotees. Uh, like many times, when we were trying to, purchase a property or, have a new temple, or, some situations looked so bad that it looked like it was impossible. But then, by Krishna's mercy, it became possible. Yeah. So, like for example, there was this. We were trying to build a temple, and the Sammamish temple. We were trying to, there was a small house there, so we were going to build a temple there. So one uh, lady came. She was from the government, and she walked around the, the 1 acre property that we had, and she said, "Oh, you have a wetland right here, and I'm going to report this, and you won't be able to build a big temple. You can only build a very small temple." Right. So we were like devastated when she said that. So we did like 24-hour kirtan. And in a short period, she was sent somewhere else to be, a nuisance. And the new guy that replaced her, he was a really nice guy. He came and looked at what was supposed to be a wetland and said, "Well, it's just a little wetland. Just throw some dirt on top of it." And that was the end of it. And we were able to build a big temple. You see that? I mean, we were praying. We were doing 24-hour kirtan, and that late something would change. And what changed is the lady went somewhere else, and the new guy came in and said, "Oh, well, just throw some dirt on top of it." So it wasn't a wetland anymore. So, these are things that we experience in life, and it shows you that God exists. Krishna is helping his devotees. Otherwise, if that lady stayed, we would not have been able to build the temple. And she was very adamant about it. Okay, so I think we're finished.
Okay,
Almost.
so living in Vaikuntha is it a level of purity and consciousness? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that
And
answers. Thank
sometimes
you.
we refer to people as a Vaikuntha man, because they're acting, well, Vaikuntha is a place where there's no kunta, there's no anxiety. See, so even in the worst situations, some people see a silver lining because they're positive, and other people see all, doom. What do you say? Doom and gloom. They don't say anything positive. But in every situation, there's always going to be some silver lining, and people who are positive, they'll see that. And people who are
Yes.
negative, they never see it. So we always have to have a positive attitude due to the fact that we have complete faith in Krishna. Just like this lady, when she told us, "Oh, you have a wetland, you can't build your temple here," right? And we were like devastated. But then we did 24-hour kirtan and we were praying. All of a sudden, she was sent somewhere else. The new guy that came in, he said, "Oh, just throw some dirt on top of it. All right, it's not wetland."
Krishna moved her.
Yeah, Krishna, exactly. Krishna
Yeah, he
removed.
does that.
And there's a nice pastime of, I think it was Haridas Thakur. He was living in a cave, but there was a big snake in that cave. And the devotees would come to hear his lectures, but every once in a while the snake would, poke his head out of some hole or something. It's freak everyone out completely. Uh, so it became so frightening that the devotees said, "Well, Haridas, we can't come here anymore. We're too afraid. That snake scares us so much." And Haridas says, "Oh, well, I'm sorry." And as soon as they said they were not going to come anymore, and Haridas said, "Oh, I'm very sorry," the snake left. It slithered away out. Now, how did that happen? Because Krishna is in the heart of everyone, including the snake. And because it
Yes.
was going to be, let's say a disturbance for the pure devotee Haridas, Krishna gave the, let's say, signal to the snake that goes somewhere else. And it did. So don't think that these things can't happen, or they're just make believe stories. They're factual stories. Because Krishna is in the heart of every living entity, including the snakes. So the snake left, and Haridas didn't have to move, right? And the devotees could come and hear his lectures there. Otherwise, it was going to be difficult for Haridas to move. So in order that its devotee not be encumbered by the snake, it looks like Krishna, told the snake, leave.
Yeah.
And and so there are experiences like that. They're not fairy tales. Just like the lady that told us, "Oh, you can't build a temple here because you have a wetland." And she goes away, and then the next guy that comes, he's also an inspector. He said, "Oh no, just throw some dirt on that thing, and it'll be all right." It's amazing, isn't it? The way there's different opinions by people.
Sounds very miraculous.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we'll stop there unless there are any questions. Okay, going once, twice, three times. Haribo. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
So we will meet again tonight, 7 o'clock, for more discussions. Thank you all very much. And chant Hare Krishna and be happy.